Hello and welcome to the Trobe News. Thank you for tuning into today's program. We have an interesting topic to review today, which has stirred up some debate over the last 30 years. Yes, today we'll be talking about fluoridation in the water supply and the effect it has on children's teeth. I'm pleased to announce we have some special guests for you today, including dentist Christy Ballard, epidemiologist Anita Cray, and fluoride mum from rural Victoria, Catherine. So what's the magnitude of tooth decay in children, and how is tooth decay really important compared to other health issues? Dental decay, also known as dental caries or tooth decay, is one of the most common chronic diseases worldwide. In Australia, almost half of children have tooth decay experienced by the age of 6, and individuals remain susceptible to tooth decay throughout their life. According to the Australian Dental Association, tooth decay is defined as the most common health problem in children aged 2 to 19. With evidence showing that tooth decay has 5 times more prevalence than asthma in young children. It is alarming to know that more than 25% of 2 to 5-year-olds and 50% of kids aged between 12 to 15 have one or more cavities, and 2/3 of 16 to 19-year-olds in Australia remain susceptible to tooth decay. The number one cause of tooth decay is diet-related and 90% preventable. So if 90% preventable, then why do we still have this issue? Well, the increased consumption of sugary foods and drinks on a regular basis does not help, making tooth decay the second most costly diet-related disease in Australia. Tooth decay occurs when plaque is present as a sticky film of bacteria. This bacterium converts excess sugars in your mouth to turn to acid. Over time, the acid can penetrate through the enamel and cause the tooth to decay, also called cavities or caries. According to the Australian Dental Association, Australians are becoming too complacent with their oral health, with almost 35% of parents reporting their children only having brushing their teeth once a day, with more than 60% of them accepting their child would get tooth decay in some point of their life. This alone could be the contributing factor to the 19 million decayed teeth in Australian children today. Additionally to this, the recent Australian Child Dental Health Survey showed that 48.7% of children aged 5 to 6 have experienced dental caries in their baby teeth, and approximately 41.3% of these children have remained untreated. By the age of 12, almost all children have their permanent teeth. Data revealed that 45.1% of all 12-year-olds had decay in their permanent teeth, and 24.8% remained untreated. The prevalence, severity, and level of untreated dental decay was higher in areas of low socio-economic status, including rural and remote Australia and the Indigenous population. When looking at rural and remote Australia in comparison to urban Australia, children in major cities have the lowest mean number of decayed teeth across all age groups, ranging from 0.44 to 1.19. Children in remote areas had highest levels of untreated decay at 1.19 to 2.5. The mean number of missing teeth was generally higher in children from outer regional areas at 6.3% than children from major cities. Poor access to dental care is a significant issue for people in rural and remote areas. Overall, rural residents have a higher incidence of unfavorable visiting patterns at 38% than urban residents at 27%. It is also interesting to acknowledge that Aboriginal children have twice as many cavities as non-Indigenous children. When looking at tooth decay at a worldwide level, between 60 and 90% of children have dental cavities. It is interesting to note that the prevalence of cavities in developing countries such as Africa are 14.9% lower than developed countries such as America. Other lower cavity countries include China and India. This prevalence of tooth decay may be due to the reduction of processed sugars in the typical diet across these countries. Without sugars, cavity-causing bacteria are less prevalent in these populations. To prevent tooth decay, an increased intake of calcium-rich foods in conjunction with brushing 2 times a day can reduce the risk of decay by 25%. One of the main preventative measures used in Australia today is fluoridation of the water supply. Studies have shown an 18 to 40% reduction in tooth decay from drinking fluoridated water in children. I will now pass you on to Dr. Ballard, who will give us more of an insight into fluoridation and how fluoridation can affect the child tooth development.
Thanks, Mia. As a paediatric dentist myself, I thoroughly understand how important oral health is to a child's overall health, well-being and quality of life. Having a healthy mouth enables children to eat, smile and communicate without embarrassment, discomfort or pain. In my 10 years of experience, it's safe to say I've come across my fair share of oral health issues experienced by children, and I'm a strong believer that the consumption of fluoride in both water and toothpaste works as a protective factor against dental caries, fillings, and significantly reduces a child's risk of having to have their teeth removed. However, recently I have come across the adverse effect of fluoride exposure. This is what you call dental fluorosis. Fluorosis can be mild, moderate or severe. Mild fluorosis is small white patches and severe fluorosis is brown motting and pitting of the enamel. Here is an example of the result of ingestion of too much fluoride during the period of tooth crown development. This is approximately from birth to 6 to 8 years. As we all now know, water fluoridation was the single most effective public health measure of reducing dental caries across the population. However, due to these opposed insights of fluoridation exposure, I decided to do a little research to determine the negative effects of fluoride and whether or not the benefits outweigh the risks. I first came across the Australian Dental Association, who identified that an increased exposure to water and toothpaste fluoridation, especially during the period of tooth crown development, can increase a child's risk of dental fluorosis. I then came across the World Health Organization in 2014, who published that fluoride involves a balance between the protective effect against caries and the risk of having fluorosis. They found that individuals who have a prolonged exposure to fluoride can experience consequences, such as what they call crippling skeletal fluorosis, which is associated with osteoclerosis and the calcification of tendons and ligaments, and also bone deformities. Although it is stated that there is a limited evidence of dental and skeletal fluorosis, excessive fluoride concentration in drinking water has resulted in tens of millions of dental fluorosis cases in children worldwide. After reading this, I wanted to see what studies were out there that justified this assumption. I then found a study by Dew and Spencer in 2009 that investigated the prevalence, severity and risk factors for fluorosis. It stated that fluorosis in Australian children was extremely prevalent in the early 1990s, before policy initiatives were introduced to control fluoride exposure and reduce the prevalence of fluorosis. The study's aim was to describe the prevalence, severity and risk factors for fluorosis and to identify the trend of fluorosis in Australian children. It also explored the effect of the change in fluoride exposure on dental fluorosis and caries. This study was part of a larger population-based study, the Child Oral Health Study, in Australia 2002 and 2005. The sample of 1,401 was selected from a pool of participants involved in a larger study. Children were selected by year of birth to form 3 birth cohorts. Those born in 1989 to 1990, 1991 to 1992, and 1993 to 1994. Children were then approached in two further stages, which was a dental health perception questionnaire and a clinical examination for fluorosis. 898 children took part in the first stage. From this, 677 children were examined for fluorosis by a trained dentist. The percentage of lifetime exposure to fluoridated water and patterns of exposure to fluoridated toothpaste was calculated. Fluorosis data was used to calculate the prevalence and severity of fluorosis. Results identified a higher proportion of children in the later birth cohorts used low concentrated toothpaste and only used a minimal amount of toothpaste when brushing. There was a significant decline in the prevalence of fluorosis across all 3 birth cohorts. The risk factors for fluorosis were identified as the use of standard fluoride toothpaste and children having eating or licking habits of toothpaste and the exposure of fluoridated water. This study also found that using low concentrated fluoride toothpaste, limiting licking or eating habits could also reduce the prevalence of fluorosis without increase in dental caries.
Thank you, Christy, for that wonderful insight. Now, crossing to regional Victoria to pro-fluoride mum, Catherine.
As a busy mum of 2 girls, the health of my kids' teeth is really important. Kids can suffer some pretty nasty side effects of poor dental health, including pain and lack of sleep. And as a parent, I feel the pain of paying the expensive bills. My girls brush twice a day and they floss, and I take them to see their dentist regularly. What I wanted to do was find a little bit more about the fluoride that our local council has been putting in our water. But first off, the Centre for Disease Control in America said that putting fluoride in drinking water was one of the top 10 public health achievements of the 20th century. Now, I don't know about you, but this means something to me. And I didn't stop there. I found this really great Australian research paper that supports putting fluoride into water. So the aim of this research was to compare the decay experience and prevalence of children who lived in areas where there was low fluoride and where there was optimal fluoride. So their data came from 128,000 5 to 15-year-olds who attended their local school dentist. The study looked at the age, the last time the kids went to the dentist, their socio-economic status, where they lived. And they took all that information from all the states and territories in Australia, except for New South Wales. So what they were looking for in each of the children was evidence of decay, missing or filled teeth in both deciduous and permanent. They weighted the data that they gathered for the probability of selection and also for the last time that they went to the dentist, so that those with good dental health weren't underrepresented in the sample. So the results reported that 46% of the children in the study came from areas where there was low fluoride and 53 came from areas where there was optimal fluoride. So what they ultimately found was that those who came from low fluoride areas had more decay, there were more missing teeth, and there were more teeth that had been filled when they compared to what they found in participants living in optimally fluoridated areas. So the prevalence of caries in deciduous teeth from children from the low areas was about 7.41%, which was 31% higher than those living in optimally fluoridated areas. And they also found very similar results in the permanent teeth from both of those areas. Furthermore, after controlling for age, location, socioeconomic status, there still remained a statistically significant association between fluoride concentration and dental disease. The mean number of decayed, missing or filled teeth in deciduous dentition in optimally fluoridated areas was 1.8 teeth per child, with a 95% confidence interval of 1.77 to 1.86. Now this was much lower when they compared decayed, missing or filled teeth in children from the low areas, and they had a mean average of 2.33 with a 95% confidence interval of 2.28 to 2.38. And again, they found similar results in the permanent teeth.
Thank you, Catherine. Lastly, on today's program, we hear from epidemiologist Anita, who will give us more insight into fluoridation in Australia today. Crossing live from Brisbane.
I'm sitting here today in the capital city of Queensland, where just 5 years ago, Brisbane did not have fluoridated water. So by 1977, all Australian states and mainland territories, with the exception of Queensland, had widely implemented fluoride in their water supply. This disparity in public health strategies continued until December 2007, when Queensland Premier Anna Bligh implemented a $36 million program to have fluoridated water throughout Queensland. This decision was made after research showed that Queenslanders had the highest levels of tooth decay and the lowest level of access to water fluoridation in the whole of Australia. So let's go back to when Brisbane did not have fluoride in their water. There was sufficient evidence from both the World Health Organisation and the Australian Dental Association for the need to fluoridate water supplies, as shown between two Queensland towns, Brisbane and Townsville, with children aged between 5 and 12 years in Townsville having 45% less tooth decay than their Brisbane children counterparts. In Citek, Hayes-Bishus and Duran's article, they calculated an odds ratio of 1.8 with a 95% confidence interval of 1.6 to 2.0. This odds ratio indicated that deciduous tooth surfaces in non-fluoridated Brisbane were nearly twice as likely to have caries experience than the deciduous tooth surfaces in fluoridated Townsville. A limitation of this study, resulting in the ratio being underestimated, would be that the dental caries between Brisbane and Townsville was only applied to deciduous dentition and not for permanent dentition. In Slade, Spencer, Davies and Stewart's article, they had 4,749 participants from Townsville and 5,704 from Brisbane. This study revealed caries rates were significantly lower, with a p-value of less than 0.01 among children in Townsville than in Brisbane, both in deciduous dentition, who had 32 to 55% fewer tooth surfaces affected, and permanent dentition, with 20 to 65% fewer tooth surfaces affected. At the time of these two studies, Townsville had been fluoridated since 1964, and Brisbane was a non-fluoridated city. As evident, both these studies strongly indicate that fluoridated water is crucial in maintaining good oral health. The uptake of Queensland Premier Annabelle's public health program has seen an increase from 5% of Queenslanders having access to fluoridated water in 2008 to 87% in 2012. Back to you, Mia.
Well, thank you, Christy, Anita, and Catherine, for that wonderful insight on fluoridation. To conclude, through the knowledge gained today, it is evident that every person of every age benefits from drinking fluoridated water throughout their whole life. Children benefit as soon as their teeth are formed, and elderly people keep their teeth for longer. Overall, fluoride reduces prevalence of developing tooth decay in all ages. Thank you for tuning in to La Trobe News. Have a great day.